Well, ladies and gentlemen, we had to wait a while, that's for sure, but it finally did happen. Joe Rogan last night on election eve did endorse Donald Trump. He had a podcast with Elon Musk. It was put out strategically the day before the election to try and get people to go to the polls. We do have some early reports. A lot of men voting day of. Not surprised at all. Those are just early reports. We'll see what happens throughout the day. But the big news here from last night, I was on my live stream. People were telling me it did happen. And I thought, this was a pretty cool little post here from Joe Rogan talking about the great and powerful Elon Musk. If it wasn't for him, we'd be effed. He makes what I think is the most compelling case for Trump you'll hear. And I agree with him every step of the way. For the record, yes, that's an endorsement of Trump. Enjoy the podcast. So he does confirm that he did endorse Trump. This is something that, to be honest, at a certain point, I didn't think was going to happen. I mean, with a few days left before the election, but it doesn't surprise me considering he endorsed RFK Jr., he had Trump on, he had JD Vance on, Kamala Harris didn't want to go on, then she goes on SNL. It's just, the whole thing's a mess. I don't think even if she would have went on, he would have endorsed Harris. Certainly no. I still think he would have endorsed Trump. But, you would have liked this to happen maybe a little bit earlier, but either way, this is still kind of a cool thing to see the little grand finale here when it comes to endorsements. It is Rogan endorsing Trump. And I think Rogan's a little bit different when it comes to your typical celebrities who really don't know anything about politics. Rogan talks to many, many different political figures. He did support Bernie Sanders, although I really don't think he was necessarily a crazy big Bernie supporter back in 2016. Didn't really support anyone in 2020, but he talks to a ton of people, obviously, knows a ton of info. And this is a cool endorsement. It really is. It's a lot bigger than any of the, Cardi B or any of these liberal people like Taylor Swift. None of them know anything. With Rogan, this is something that's, will it help? I think, it might help it very, very slightly get more men to the polls, but it's more so just a symbolic thing, I would say. And it just shows you how in 2024, people really aren't afraid to endorse Trump at this point and wear the Trump merch out in liberal areas. I really think the assassination attempt and Trump surviving that really was a turning point in this election. It's funny how I feel like we're going to come full circle because we remember after the assassination attempt, Trump with the fist and saying fight, that was a huge moment. And a lot of us came out, the Republicans, we were like, Trump's won the election because of this. It's crazy. And then, you kind of forget about it. It gets pushed to the back burner and people are like, no, there's no way. But I feel like we're going to come full circle and we're going to be like, yes, that single moment. Maybe it didn't for sure win him in the election because we don't know that, but that moment made Trump way more likable, humanized him, and I think it's just going to be a huge moment. And also, how symbolic is it happening in Pennsylvania, which is by far the most important swing state? He goes back to the same place that he was shot at, and he does a rally with 108,000, and that's when Elon Musk does his first rally with Trump. It just really is a crazy story, and Trump had his last rally last night. I mean, it's crazy to see someone run for president 3 straight times with all of those rallies. 2020, a little bit different in terms of the pandemic messing up the rally schedule. It is crazy just thinking about, say what you want about Kamala, and she didn't do a ton of rallies, but no matter what, it is grueling to go through a campaign. And to see Biden just get away with doing nothing and winning, it's just so irritating. And back in 2020, because of the pandemic, he didn't do any rallies. And of course, it's the excuse, it's the pandemic. But the idea that, this is a grueling thing. It's just constant interviews. It's constant rallies. Trump had, I think, 3 rallies yesterday. Harris had 4 rallies. Their last rallies were at 10 and 11 o'clock at night. It's just crazy. But you can see, that's a really cool moment right there. And I'm sure most people know by now at this point. Here you can see men are surging to the polls in mass. And we knew that was going to happen. I said that was going to happen. But you have to fearmonger if you are the Republican influencers. I understand why they did it, to make sure men get to the polls. But it was always expected. Women do more early voting. Men do more day of. Let's make sure this trend continues here. But it does look like there's going to be a ton of men going to the polls today. And you're going to see maybe people not necessarily underestimate day of turnout, but there's just so much overanalyzation when it comes to the early vote. I mean, the early vote definitely matters. I mean, my goodness, I didn't realize it was around 76 million the last time I checked yesterday, and who knows what it is at this point. This is kind of interesting. A small little New Hampshire town, they traditionally vote. They put in the first votes at midnight, In 2020, the votes were 5-0 for Biden. Now Trump, it's 3-3. So maybe Trump's flipped some of them there in New Hampshire. That's a sign of things to come. That confirms Trump is going to win New Hampshire. He's flipping people there. But nah, it's just a little funny thing. We'll see what happens with New Hampshire. There was I'm not even going to go over I think it's enough with the polls. I will say, though, we did have a final release of Atlas Intel, and the Atlas Intel polls were good last night. How many times are they going to release polls? I mean, it's like they've said they're going to release final polls 5 times now. But these Texas, Ohio, Montana final polls, I mean, if you're Trump, Ohio might be a little bit annoying with the 8.5. You would like it to be a little bit higher, but still Moreno would win if Trump wins Ohio by 8.5. And I think it'll be more than 8.5 considering 2020 and 2016 he won it by 8.1. Texas over 10, that seems like crazy. If that happens, you're talking about popular vote victory for Trump. Montana plus 20, it's understandable. Sheehy's looking at like maybe a 12 or a 13-point win at this point. Trump's going to be around 18 to 20 points in Montana, I would say. When it comes to that state, you've got the final polls here. This was kind of weird with Georgia being a tie. I will say I have seen some closer Georgia polls, but obviously if you're Trump, you're going to love these results. I mean, you're winning every swing state except Georgia, Arizona 3.1, or Arizona 4, Nevada 3, North Carolina by 2, Michigan by almost 2. How about Michigan being more conservative than Wisconsin and Pennsylvania in this poll? I mean, they're all so close. It's hard to really say. I still think Pennsylvania is probably going to be the one that goes the furthest to the right, but there's just so close margins. Other states, this is an interesting one. Minnesota, Harris plus 2, Virginia, Harris plus 5, and then there's Texas, Montana. Kerry Lake potentially, you'll take Kerry Lake winning. Unfortunately, the 3 Rust Belts, the Republicans are losing there. We're going to have to maybe, I'm hopeful one of the Rust Belts will swing, potentially the Hovde in Wisconsin. You can see Hovde's only down by 0.9 here. I think Rogers is going to have a tough time in Michigan. McCormick, the polls have been a little bit worse for him the past few days. I will say that. Whether or not that means anything, if Trump's able to win Pennsylvania by around 2 points, I think McCormick can squeak by with a 0.5 point victory in the Senate when it comes to that. But that's just the thing I wanted to go over. You can see, I mean, listen, when it comes to this podcast, I know why they did it, but it is kind of funny when you think about Musk and Rogan doing this huge podcast. And it's happening right when everything else is going on. And this podcast is, it's going to be hard to watch this podcast after the election because they're going to be talking about why Trump needs to win. And then obviously once the election happens, the podcast is not going to age very well. I wonder if Elon and Rogan will do another podcast right after the election. If they'll end up, I'm sure they talk about, Mars and all that type of stuff, but it's interesting the timing of this podcast. I understand why they did it to try and, it's a huge name. Rogan's been on a crazy run with Vance and Trump and Musk and John Fetterman. How can we forget him? But no. I mean, at least Fetterman did go on there. Rogan kind of schooled Fetterman on immigration because, I mean, it is what it is. And then he posted the clip. It was kind of funny. Either way, I mean, at this point, it is what it is. It is election day. We'll have to see what ends up happening when it comes to who votes. And that's a good endorsement from Rogan. Also, I'm going to take a quick look at the betting odds. I did not refresh since last night. So where will Trump be at? Wow, that's a nice surge right there. Trump's up to 62 right now. So we'll see. Maybe that's a sign it's going to be a good day. 62-38. So that's a big move back in Trump's direction. Wisconsin looks decent now for Trump. It's going back to a toss-up. So some good news there. It is just the betting markets, but I do think there was, I had said there was going to be a stabilization when it comes to the betting markets. Trump's been leading this election the entire time. Trump was always up in the polls. The media said it was 50-50. It was never 50-50. When you lose, you say it's 50-50. Liberals have been losing this entire election, and so they say, oh, it's anyone's ball game. Well, I mean, I guess technically that's true. I mean, Harris could still win, but she's not the favorite. No, Donald Trump is the favorite, according to all the polls and all the metrics, and you get the final Gallup party ID. I think it's plus Republican 1.3. I'm not saying Gallup for sure is going to be right, but it signals a Donald Trump a popular vote victory. And if that happens, it's a guaranteed electoral college victory as well. So that is just the update, guys. That's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.